questions I ask authors regularly, none strikes confusion into the heart of aspiring memoir writers more than what is your topic? But choosing a topic is actually one of the most beneficial things you can do for your memoir. And today, I want to talk about why. Today, let's cover the 3 reasons you must define your memoir's topic before you even start. Stay tuned. You know that feeling when a book just hits you? Not because the story is wild, but because it's shaped so intentionally that it almost makes you rethink your own story. You finish that last page and think, how did they do that? The structure, the honesty, the clarity. There's something under the surface that you just can't put your finger on. And the reason is, unless someone shows you how memoirs actually work, it's hard to translate that inspiration into your own writing. And that's exactly why we created the Memoir Method Monthly Book Club. If you want to join Emily Thrash every single month to dig into an exemplary memoir and figure out what's happening under the surface, head over to pageandpodium.com/book club. Your first month is free, and we can't wait to welcome you to the group. Y'all, I totally get the confusion that comes up when I ask folks, what is the topic of your memoir? This seems like the most obvious question anyone could ever ask. Of course, the topic of my memoir is my life. And yes, by definition, the memoir genre is about people's lives. But at the same time, as I have talked about many times on this channel, while your memoir is about your life, if you want it to find any kind of a readership, it's gotta be about more than just your life. And that's why I wanted to talk today about your memoir topic, because I do find that it is really difficult to look at your life from that 10,000-foot view that we really need to choose what that topic will be. Now, before we kind of get into, first of all, what I mean by your memoir's topic, I do want to talk a little bit about how I see this misunderstood. And then, of course, we're going to get into the 3 reasons that this is so important. And even if you already are on Team Memoir topic, listen to the end, because I think you'll find that some of the reasons for defining your topic also are really helpful tips in how to define your topic. Okay, so with that, let's get into it. I want to start actually by talking about what your memoir topic is not. And that is, your memoir's topic is not a theme, it's not a message, it is not, in fact, anything that is abstract and vague at all. I know that seems really confusing because often when we're thinking about a book's topic, we are quite literally talking about the thing that draws others into it. And of course, very, very often, especially the writers that listen to this channel, I know that yes, you want to tell your story, but it is just as important to you that your story is effective at reaching and helping other people, usually folks who are in the position that you were in not so long ago yourself. And for that reason, I find that the number one confusion about what your memoir's topic is ends up being that people will confuse their memoir's message with their memoir's topic. So to give you just a quick kind of contrast of what these 2 things are, your memoir's topic should actually be quite concrete. It is typically going to be the slice of your life that you want to cover in this particular book. Now, one thing that I do find catches folks off guard is that very often we think that we are going to write our memoir, our one memoir. I will tell you, spoiler alert, this process of writing a book can be very, very addictive, and very, very often, I would say the majority of the cases actually, of folks who come through our coaching program end saying, all right, well, this book's done, what's the next one? So you may not actually be writing your memoir. You may be writing your first memoir. And the reason I bring that up is that most memoir writers do end up having at least more than one idea for a memoir, if not more than one memoir. And the reason I want to point that out is that what I see very, very often, especially from folks who are pretty new to thinking about the idea of writing a memoir, is that it's so easy to get caught up in the idea that your story needs to be the exciting thing that drives that book forward. I get that. I get that. We live in this world of being inundated by stimuli all the time. And it seems as though the things that get the attention are the most dramatic things. So, very often, when I am speaking to folks who are in the very, very, very early stage of writing their memoir, I will say, what are the things that you want to include in that memoir? This is, in fact, the first step of writing any book, but particularly with memoir, this is really important. So usually, folks will start out with a particular instance that is actually a great topic. They may say something like, oh, yeah, I want to talk about that time when I was founding the business that I run right now. That's what my memoir is about. Or they may say, oh, I really want to focus on when I had breast cancer. Or, I want to focus actually on when we adopted our third child. Whatever it may be. Those are great topics. All three of those topics are really great. But then, oftentimes I find if I let the silence sit for just a little bit, they will start to pile on more things. So, sure, we started with this memoir is about when I founded my company. But now we start to run into, and while I was doing that, I had this major medical issue. While I was doing that, I went through bankruptcy. While I was doing that, I had X and Y and Z and Q and R and A. Exciting, exciting things. And all of those things must be in the book. Now, it is worth saying here that things can be in your book that are not part of your topic. And in fact, that is such an important thing to keep in mind. Where this most often comes up is when folks try to put in a bunch of stuff about their childhood. I get this. So let's say your topic is a memoir about founding your business. Well, it might be relevant, and in fact, often is, that when you were growing up, you were around businesses. Maybe your parents owned a business. Maybe you, as you kind of came out of college, you had friends that started entrepreneurship. All kinds of ways this could happen that are going to require us to loop in childhood and other kind of earlier memories that happened before really we were in that kind of topic space. And this actually is true of most memoirs. Most memoirs are going to need to loop things in that are outside of that main topic. But as you'll see, as we get into the reasons you need to define your topic, that is not as important as knowing what the primary topic is. We have lots of leeway, lots of leverage to put all kinds of things in if they do, in fact, serve that topic. We've just got to know what the topic is so that we can identify when we are piling things onto it in our kind of fear of not being exciting enough, in our insecurity that our story's going to fall flat, all those kinds of things. Instead, when we add things that are outside of that main topic, we want to be really sure that the reason we're adding them is to serve the topic rather than just try to make the story more exciting. So when we are thinking about your memoir topic, you are thinking of something that is pretty concrete. It is a pretty objectively definable slice of your life. So where do we tend to go wrong when we're trying to think of the topic, but we don't necessarily have the guidance to really get it firm? Well, what I often find is that the default way we will switch to is that rather than defining our topic, we will define our message. Now, very specifically and for very specific reasons, we separate out topic from message in our group program, the Memoir Method. If this seems easier said than done, I will tell you that in that group program, we do have a step-by-step, a 7-step process that we ask you to go through. There are tons of video tutorials, there are interactive worksheets, plus, of course, in the program, you do have the guidance and support and accountability from both myself and Emily. But that said, as you are going through this process, whether that's part of our group program or as a DIY, we do want to stay very, very focused on the message versus the topic and making sure that those are two distinct things. So what is your message? Well, we talk about this all the time on this channel. So wherever you're listening, just flip back the last few months. You will see tons of guidance on your message. For now, suffice it to say, your message is typically the one thing that you learned from going through the things you went through in your topic. So if your topic is starting my first business, well, I want to know what you learned from it. But what you learned from it is not your topic. So let me kind of give you a very specific example of this that just came up in a consult the other day. Now, this is a woman who is writing a book about adopting her first child. Now, the topic is the actual adoption process, which, if you have not been through it, just hearing from clients, it is so fraught. There are so many things that you go through in that process. Now, when we're thinking of the topic of adopting the child, certainly we've also got to talk about her background and struggle with infertility, because this is what brought her to the adoption process. And yet, I think you can pretty easily see we could either have her topic be adopting a child, or we could have her topic be infertility. There's a lot of overlap, but those are not the same story, right? Those are not the same topic. Oftentimes, people adopt children regardless of their infertility, and many people struggle with infertility but never adopt a child. Those are different topics. So when I was chatting with her about what she wanted the book to be, we started at this adoption point. But of course, she had tons of things to share, not only about her journey through infertility, but also about her childhood, how she had always imagined having children, how she had seen people around her have children, her friends, her family, and wanted so badly to have that same experience. Now, we're not going to cut that stuff out. That stuff is really important. But what we are going to do is very specifically bracket what that topic is. Now, when I asked her what her message was, she wasn't really sure kind of how to distinguish those. But as we talked, I suspect her message will end up being something about love. Because the thing that she was saying to me was that what adoption did for her was challenge the limits of her love. She both struggled to love in the way that she wanted to, and had so much love overflowing from herself for her family that it was really difficult to reconcile those things. And her message is going to be something about expanding our capacity to love, about bringing people into our world, and about how we often have to go through a lot of struggle before we get to the joy that we want. Well, that's a powerful message. But if that were our topic, it would tell us very little about what needs to go in that book and what should either go in a different book or in a kind of sub-location within this book. It doesn't give us much direction, right? Now, what the message does do is it guides us in the type of theme and the type of framing and the type of way that we talk about the story. But what the topic does is it tells us what belongs and what doesn't. So we really need both of those. And the reason I wanted to point that out, again, is that I find so often when I ask folks what their topic is, instead the answer that I will get is actually their message. So as you're thinking through, I want you to be really clear with yourself. I want you to be really honest with yourself. Do you actually have your topic designed? Or is your head kind of up in the clouds thinking about the messagey stuff? They are both important, but I will tell you, the message stuff is way more fun to think about. And especially if you are somebody who typically takes that 10,000 foot view, you are in tons of danger of getting caught up in that head in the clouds view, when actually where you need to be is feet on the ground, figuring out that topic. We need both, but most people will come up with their message first, and we've also got to make sure we pause and get that topic in there. But why? Well, let's talk about it. What are the top 3 reasons that you need to define your topic? Well, number 1, without a defined topic, you will continue to be tempted to throw in everything but the kitchen sink. In fact, if your kitchen sink is very exciting, you might throw that in there too. When we have a topic, on the other hand, we know that that topic is a promise to our readers of what we plan to cover. So, in the example I used a little bit ago, the woman who is adopting her child, well, there is a particular type of audience who is looking for adoption stories, who is looking for what is the experience of adoption. As I mentioned earlier, Some of those folks have struggled with infertility and some haven't. And what that means is when we know that the thing we are focused on is the adoption, it allows us to understand the hierarchy of the points that we want to make in here. As I said earlier, it doesn't mean we're cutting out these things that don't exactly fit into the topic, but it does mean that we know which things need more weight and which things can be kind of sub or context pieces. This is gold. When you are going through even the development, the structuring piece, getting your outline together, you are going to need to have something to rein you in. And in fact, this is something that I experienced with outlining my own memoir. What I found was, even though my memoir is about leaving academia to found a company, that is the topic of it, as I went through those experiences, I also was in a pretty toxic, damaging, abusive relationship. And to get out of there, I had to do some things that, of course, interacted with the way that I was building the business. Of course, there's no way around that, right? But as I was outlining the memoir, a powerful thing happened. And that is that I could see very, very clearly when I had drifted from that leaving academia to start a business track into the toxic relationship track. Those are different topics. And in fact, I am planning to write a second memoir on that second piece because there's a story to be told there too, right? It's just not a story that needs to be front and center, really, in any part of the leaving academia memoir. They just aren't the same topic. And when we have defined our topic, we are in such a better place to see what that actually might mean. We're in such a better place to actually, in a concrete way, make the edits we need to make, pick the things that need to stay, sub-optimize the things that need to be kind of sub-optimized, and cut the things that shouldn't really even be in there in the first place. Okay, number 2, the second reason that defining your topic is going to serve you so well throughout this writing process is that when you define your topic, you are also defining your audience. Now, of course, I teased this a little bit earlier. When we think about particular topics, we know that those particular topics are going to align you with particular audiences. Now, of course, for the purposes of just illustration, I am being kind of non-nuanced in how these audiences break up. It is not true that no one will read an adoption story about infertility unless they have infertility and are adopting. That is not true. Lots of people can enjoy and learn from our stories, even if their experiences aren't exactly the same. But also, audiences have particular things that they expect once you make the promise that you are delivering on a particular topic. And what that means is, if you want to connect with that audience, you are going to need to be very, very clear and very, very bounded about what your topic is. There is nothing that will drive readers away faster than if they feel like you are wandering around your life, not getting to the point. We have to know where we are going. And when we define our topic, we know. When we define our topic, it is so much clearer who needs that book. Now, I say all the time, we need to write for ourselves and edit for our audience. That, of course, means you've got to write in a way that is true to you. I am not saying in any way that you need to take your writing and target it just towards some imagined, usually, niche. But what I am saying is that when you are moving forward with the development stage of a process, you are going to need to know who that process is serving. Not because it's going to lock you into a particular type of writing, but because it's going to give you a point that you're headed toward. And there is nothing more valuable when we are talking about a large-scale, long-term process than being able to know where you're headed. Your topic is going to give you that. So that is the second reason we've got to know who we're speaking to really write an effective book. And if we don't know what our topic is, we usually also don't know who our audience is. The topic is going to serve us so well in this way because it really makes it much clearer where we need to focus and where we need to go. Okay, the third reason that you must have a topic defined, this is a big one, y'all. When you have your topic defined, you will be in such a better position to choose your memoir's starting point. Now, this is a big one because what I often find is when folks have not defined their topic, where do they start? Childhood. Of course, this makes sense. If we don't know what exactly that slice of life is, well, doesn't it make sense to just go chronologically? And for most people, there is going to be, if not childhood, at least some memories that we need to include for context that are earlier than the start of that topic. But when you know what the topic is, now we are free. Now we are not locked into just having to default to chronological. Now we know that the point that memoir should start is the point that is relevant to the topic. Because we're not going to get to the topic on page 100 and have the readers that we want still engaged. We've got to get to the topic on page 1. So, defining your topic is going to help you so much with this, because if you can decide what exactly it is you're talking about, then you can just simply start at the point when that topic starts, right? Of course, I'm being a little cheeky here. This is not so cut and dried, but at the same time, if you don't have a topic, I would venture a guess that you don't have any idea where you should start your memoir. It's just part of it. If we don't know what we're trying to say, if we don't know where we're trying to go, we don't really know where to start either. So we've got to define that topic, and then we're in such a better place to bracket the start and the end of our memoir because we know what it is we're trying to accomplish. Okay, so we have been talking then about the reasons why your book has got to have both a clear message, yes, but also a clear topic. I cannot stress this enough, and it is the reason that our Memoir Method trademarked system is built on the interaction between your topic and your message. Because when we have both of these, we are so much better able to write a powerful book that's going to draw people in, that's going to get across the point that you want to make. So from here, you have got your marching orders. We have got to define those topics. Once you have, send it in to me. I would love to hear what kind of topics you're working with. You can leave that in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or email us at books@pageandpodium.com. We would love to hear from you. And speaking of which, if you are feeling a little lost on your topic and or your message or any part of your memoir, I want to invite you to apply for our group program, the Memoir Method. As I mentioned earlier, we take you through step by step by step by step through the hardest part of writing a memoir, the development. And then once you finish that, we review your outline. 2 professional editors look at it, give you any feedback, and then move forward. Walk you through getting on that chapter train, that joy and momentum of knowing exactly what you're supposed to write, exactly when you plan to write it, and exactly how to make sure it's moving your reader forward to the point you want to move them forward to. So if that sounds good, you can apply at pageandpodium.com/contact. Again, I would love to hear about your book, and please rate, review, share, and subscribe. It really, really does help us reach more people like you who need our support. And we are so appreciative of everyone that takes the time to do that. So get to your topic, define your message, and get that memoir moving. I cannot wait to read it. Happy writing.
You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up.